Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today I have with me Jessica Van Roekel. Jessica is actually a individual and group coach, and she does training as well for Voice of Influence clients. We are so excited to have her with us today. Last week we talked about manager training program that Jessica runs, and we this week have the opportunity to hear from Jessica about her new book that's releasing very soon called Reframing Rejection: How Looking Through a Different Lens Changes Everything. This is such a timely topic. I think it's something we all need to think about, especially those of us who really care about what other people think and who, want to connect deeply with other people. So, Jessica, welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast.
Thank you so much. I am grateful to be here.
Okay, so let's start with, tell me about why you decided to write Reframing Rejection. How did this book come about?
Well, it came about a little bit out of my own story, coupled with my observations of what's happening within the world, as well as my observations of other people in their relationships. So I don't really like rejection. I think it hurts. It damages relationships, and it feels like if there's rejection, then something is like ended completely and totally. And so I spent a lot of my life trying to avoid rejection because I don't like to feel pain, to be honest. I don't think anybody does, but I'm like pain adverse, emotional, mental, that type of a thing. I just like happy, happy, happy. And I'm not really a Pollyanna because I'm pretty realistic that there's hard things in life. I mean, my family was, my parents divorced when I was really little, so I'm familiar with hard things in life. But I always look for the bright side, right? And so I kind of don't really care for spending too much time wallowing in discomfort. However, rejection like followed me through my life. I don't know, I'm a classic firstborn, super responsible. I really want to please people. I want to make sure they're happy with me. I know there's a couple different types of firstborns, but I fall into, I just want to make everybody happy. And if you look at me sideways, I think you've just rejected me, right? And so, which doesn't seem real that big, except it turned into this people pleasing addiction where I would do everything that I could to avoid someone's disapproval, which I translated as rejection. And so I spent my childhood and my adolescence, contorting myself into whatever someone thought was awesome. If a teacher really admired kids that paid attention to details, well, by golly, I paid attention to details, even though the details kind of give me a headache. If someone praised analysis, well, then I'm going to be super analytical, which I don't know that I really am. So I would just spend all those years just twisting myself into just this strange, well, I've just felt like a chameleon. And I kind of just wondered, well, who in the world is Jessica Van Roekel, at that time, Kiwi? And then, my 20s, I kind of kept that track going. And then I got to around 30 and I realized I don't even know what I like anymore. I don't know who I am. You know, is it okay if I have a different opinion? Do I have to change my opinion based on, the next person that I'm with? And so I thought, well, I think I'm going to work on that. And one of the things that and this is just a side note, but one of the things that happened to me in my 30s is I met you, Andrea, and I was a part of the Voice of Influence Academy, and just the different things that I learned in there, just about authenticity and transparency and my strengths and my voice, and how the world sees me and who I want to be, just kind of created this shift inside. It helped with this shift that I was experiencing of, maybe I need to examine the power that I've allowed rejection and the fear of it to have in my life. And then I hit 40 I don't know, there must be something that happens when we hit 40. We become super introspective. Well, I did anyway. And I'm like, and it dawned on me, rejection is never going to go away. It didn't matter what
Mm.
I did to avoid it. It didn't matter if I changed my opinion based on the changing world's opinion. I just felt like a little leaf floating away in the wind and just going here and there. And I didn't like that. I didn't want to live like that anymore. And so I thought, well, if rejection's a part of this life, I guess I better figure out how to live with rejection instead of trying to eliminate it or make myself rejection proof.
Mm.
So eliminating rejection really leads to a life of perfectionism. For me, I thought if I could be perfect, I would eliminate rejection, but that wasn't the case. And then if I made myself rejection proof, I became really hard and I closed myself off. And I am a relationship driven person. I like people. I want to be with people. I want to be around them. I want to have conversations. I want to hear their hearts. I'm just relationship driven. So trying to eliminate rejection and trying to rejection proof myself didn't really solve the impact rejection had in my life. And
Mm.
so I decided, well, maybe I need to write a book. Actually, I didn't really decide to write a book. As a Christ follower, I felt the Lord lead me to write this book, and He helped me and guided me to see my um, error in how I was viewing rejection and how there's a different way to view rejection so that I can navigate past the memories of past rejections, the impacts of present rejections, and the possibility of future rejections with grace and dignity and security, keeping myself firm and anchored on firm footing.
Oh, wow. I mean, you just preached a message to us right there already. I, okay, so you said something that I really appreciated and that resonated with something I was actually having a conversation with somebody else about today. And that's that concept of twisting yourself into what other people are looking for. Somebody else was looking for they're interested in getting another job, and so we're having this conversation about that person wanting to get the approval, get the job offer, but the interview process or the process of going through what it takes to get the job was going to be kind of antithetical to who that person it really is. So they could wedge themselves in to the picture that somebody's looking for, that the company's looking for, but ultimately they would be accepted instead of rejected. They would be accepted for somebody that they are not. And so this idea that you can't run away from it and you can't rejection proof yourself, so important, so good. So many of us struggle with this. I want to know, like, you've had this lifelong struggle looking to others for what it sounds like, worth, value, needing approval. Where do you think that came from? Do you have any sense of like when you really felt like you needed somebody else's approval to get to improve your own self-worth? Is that something that resonates?
You know, I wish I could say that I could remember a defining moment. I I have several, starting even way back in first grade when with a teacher that wouldn't allow me to go use the restroom, and I would have accidents in class, and I would have to wear clothes from the lost and found that didn't fit right. So it's that's I mean that, and then second grade I was in a different school, and kids ostracized me on the playground. I mean, for a various reason. I just, yeah, so it's just kind of been like, well, I must have to perform a certain way if people are gonna like me.
Can I just say, It's like, I'm so disturbed by the idea that a teacher would not let you go to the bathroom. I understand maybe once that happening, but multiple times? Like, what in the world is going on that we don't see an individual for the needs that they have? And then to make them make them conform to this pattern of, well, you should be able to sit in class and not go to the bathroom for however long. Um, and no acknowledgement, especially of a child, of their specific needs. I can imagine, like, that's interesting that you saw that as rejection. I can totally see why you would see that as rejection, but I wouldn't go immediately go there. But I'm like, oh yeah, that is like rejection. Like, that is tough. I mean, I'm curious, has that particular scenario, or that scenario of needing to fit into a mold, is that part of what you've seen throughout your life?
Um, yes, I would have to say, I always just wanted, I would just be whatever someone wanted me to be. So I found if I could fit into the mold, if I could, then I could avoid feeling rejected. Um, Kids can be cruel to one another. They
Hmm.
just can. And seventh grade girls are the worst, you know,
I will say seventh grade boys aren't great either.
you know,
I mean, they're great
you know,
kids. Great,
yep.
as kids, we love
As
them all,
kids, we love them
but
all,
they
but
can
we
be
can,
all be really nasty
yep,
to each other.
yep, they really can be. And so I guess I just wanted to to know that I was worth something. And I guess looking back at that first grade experience, by denying a basic need, feeling worth something is a basic need, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
Or
it's
feeling
like, as far if you were to look at like
worthy.
the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it'd be a little bit above the basic need, but it's still
It's
so
so
important.
vital and so important. So, and as a child of parents that were divorced, there was always that too. You know, my parents made that decision, and I don't condemn them at all for that. But the consequences, were, just there was questions and confusion, and those are big answers that a little kid can't really handle.
Hmm. In your book, you talk about two defining experiences that happened really close to each other, like within 6 weeks. A poor performance during the singing showcase, and the loss of what you considered to be a dear friend.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious how those two experiences and the close proximity of them um, really helped you begin to change your perspective on your relationship with rejection.
Absolutely. And I love that you said it's a relationship with rejection, because it was a relationship, and it was extremely unhealthy, and it exhibited itself through people pleasing and perfectionism and control. But what happened was when I hit that milestone age of 40 and decided, I put my foot down and I said, nope, rejection, you're not going to boss me around anymore. I'm going to figure out how to befriend you in a way that I can understand your presence in my life. And so after that happened, I experienced two events within a very short time frame. And but leading up to that, I had spent about 5 months in prayer and meditation, and seeking the Bible for answers. And I felt like I had been received some really interesting revelations about my misguided understanding of who I was, of my purpose, and how I perceived other people. And I'm like, this is great, but it's like any education, we go to college and then we have to intern, right? So these two experiences were like my intern. It's like I had about 5 months of just a really new way of looking at rejection and thinking about it. And then I had two back-to-back experiences where I got to put my new way of thinking into practice. And so, yes, I ended up, I was at a conference, and one of the opportunities was to sing for a panel of professionals. And I did terrible. And I'm not exaggerating. I really did do terrible.
Oh my gosh. I just have to say, I can relate. I can relate. Like, you're good, you can do this, but then you have this like terrible moment and it bombs. Oh, that's tough.
It wasn't just a bomb, it was a grenade. That's all.
Does it feel a little bit like misrepresenting yourself?
Just a little bit.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the second one is I got a breakup email from a longtime friend.
Hmm.
So just ending our friendship. And it took me by surprise
Hmm.
because I didn't really know that that's where she was going. And so, and because again, relationships, I'm a relationship driven person. If we're friends, I'm pretty much going to be your friend until you send me an email that says, I don't want you in my life anymore.
Wow. I can't, I have to admit, I can't imagine somebody doing that with you, but I mean,
Ah.
do you want to share anything about like the context of that?
Um, you know, the context probably comes down to is that the way that I put it in my book is that I don't think I had learned yet how to wear my convictions without making someone feel like they needed to wear them too.
Hmm.
And but I'm not going to say that it was all my fault. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just saying that
Mm-hmm.
in every dance there are two people, in every relationship dance. That's the part that I can own and that I will own. Um and the other part I don't, I can't speak for my friend because I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what's in her heart. I can
Mm-hmm.
only know that it took me by surprise, and I had a choice whether I could spiral into my old way of handling rejection, which was to fixate on the event, to have imaginary conversations in my head, to live a life of avoidance, go down the other aisle, that's how I did it, right? But the new way of handling rejection really was sitting and processing how I felt privately,
Mm.
me in my personal relationship with the Lord. It was remembering the things that He taught me, that I am worthy of choice. I'm worthy of being chosen, right?
Mm.
Um, Learning to delight, to depend, to trust, to surrender. Those are the key things that I needed to circle around these two experiences with, and not do my default patterns.
Mm. Wow. So you talk about 4 different kinds of rejection types. Could you share with us what those types are and kind of an example or what you mean by them?
I love that. I think this is so important because so many things that can go sideways in a relationship can be tied to these 4 types of rejection. Now, the first type of rejection is I call actual rejection. This is when you apply for a job and someone else is selected. Okay. You ask someone out on a date and they say no. That is actual rejection. That's a part of life. It happens, right? And it's something we shouldn't be afraid of because it means that we're going out there and we're trying. We're applying for that job. We're taking risks. We're living life, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
actual rejection. And then there's perceived rejection. Now, perceived rejection is when you assume that someone is going to reject you before they have a chance to like you or reject you. It's kind of like me pre-rejecting myself on behalf of the group of women that I just spoke to a few weeks ago. And that is perceived rejection. It's walking into a room and assuming that the scowl on someone else's face is about you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's walking into a business meeting, assuming that you don't it won't matter what you say because they're not going to like it anyway. Perceived rejection is all within yourself. It's within, you are assuming that someone is going to reject you before you give them an opportunity, before you even open your mouth, just by your presence. Okay. So then the third kind is intentional reject. Actually, I'm going to back up. Unintentional rejection. I want to talk about that one first. The third kind is unintentional rejection. And this is where the basis of misunderstandings come from. When we assume rejection because we misunderstood someone's words, intentions, or behavior. It would be, here's an example from like one of my daughters. She's like, so did I do something wrong? You were kind of, your tone was a little harsh. I'm like, nope, that tone was all on me. That was unintentional. I was thinking about something that I'm noodling and I'm bothered by, and I was processing that while I answered you. And so I didn't mean to make you feel rejected. That's me. That was my issue, my tone of voice.
So the difference between unintentional rejection and perceived rejection, it sounds like there's maybe there's something that actually happened.
Yes.
And so
yep.
I'm framing it.
Is misunderstanding an event or something that is said.
Yeah.
And then intentional rejection is I think one of the hardest rejections to process through, because that's when someone deliberately chooses to reject you. It's when someone just says, forget it. They write you off. They say, I do not want you in my life. Our friendship of all those years doesn't matter. That was fake, whatever. That intentional rejection. So those are the 4 types. And I think if we can understand what type of rejection we're dealing with, the layers of pain and discomfort vary, but also we know how to, I think, address each one. That with the actual rejection, we just have to process our disappointment, right? With perceived rejection, maybe we need to do some little bit more introspective and figure out, why do I assume that everybody rejects me? There might be something within me that I need to address. And then with unintentional rejection, well, frankly, we just that might show us that we kind of live with a tendency towards offense, and that maybe we shouldn't assume that person's tone of voice means that we're rejected.
Can you go a little bit more in depth on what you mean by living with an did you say attitude or something of offense? I think that's important.
Yeah. So one of the problems is being offended so easily. When we live always offended, we kind of live knives out. We kind of think that we always have to be on the defense. And well, that person's out to get me. Look at that. They said that. Listen to their tone of voice. They're out to get me. And when we live offended, I'm saying this for myself, when I choose offense, I am not tender towards people. And I believe that this world needs some tenderness.
Yeah.
And so we can disagree, but not be offended.
Yeah. It sounds like the idea of taking things personally that maybe aren't personal.
Right. And then with unintentional rejection, that needs with intentional rejection, that's a whole, we have to work on the forgiveness process. We have to grieve a relationship that is no more. That requires a more in-depth approach to reframing rejection.
I really appreciate how you have broken this down into these 4 types of rejection, because I think it helps us, like you had said something about not being super analytical, but I think this is analytical. You get a chance to say, now let's pull this problem that feels really personal. Let's pull it out and look at it on a more objective format, and then apply some wisdom to how we're going to handle things. And the way that I think, naming things helps so much. People don't, I don't think we realize the power of naming what we're experiencing.
Mhm.
So, the fact that you've given us language to understand rejection in these various forms is super helpful. And then again, to know, okay, well, how do you typically need to respond to these different kinds of rejection? Because it's not all the same.
Right.
Um, what are some maybe practical things or advice that you'd give us when we're trying to live with the approval of others and avoid rejection? Because I loved how you said that at the beginning. You can't, you're not going to be able to avoid it all the time. You can't, how did you say there's the two?
You can't eliminate it or rejection proof
There we
yourself.
go. Eliminated or rejection proof. I really like that. That's so true. So what are some things that we can do to kind of, deal with this, I guess, besides naming it, besides addressing it in that particular way that you just shared with us?
I think getting for a serial people pleaser,
Okay.
I would recommend practicing saying no on a small scale.
Hmm.
Maybe you get asked to be on a fifth committee and you just say, let me get back to you. Or you could just say, I'm sorry, I don't have the bandwidth for that right now. So for someone that is a hard thing. I mean, if you're a people pleaser, it can be hard just saying no to the next decorating committee
Or whatever it might be. Yeah,
or
totally.
whatever it might be. And the thing that I want someone who's struggling with people pleasing also to remember is that whatever you say yes to, you're saying no to something else.
Yeah.
So spend a little time and determine what's really important to you, and figure out what your priorities are. So I have three main priorities in my life, and what I say yes to has to fit. Actually, I have four, has to fit into one of those priorities. And if it doesn't, then I need to weigh the risk of the relationships and the other priorities and the time that I have to give
Mm.
them. So that's the outside practical thing that you can do. On the inside, an internal shift that I'm call a serial people pleaser, because you kind of are, it's kind of what we do, is to remember that um, humankind's praise is fickle, and chasing after that is like chasing after the wind.
Mm.
We cannot catch it.
Mm.
And so we need to, if you are a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ, I look to him to figure out I am approved and pleased with him first and foremost. But it's learning to be okay with who you are, strengths and weaknesses.
Hmm. Chasing after the wind. Yeah. I've thought of it as almost like, end up riding a roller coaster all the time.
That
Oh,
too.
good. I am approved. People like me. And so I'm high, and then uh-oh, something happened and burst my bubble and now I'm low. And like you said, like there's no stability in that. How do you keep moving forward? You just chase after the highs,
Yes.
and that's exhausting.
It
That's
is.
and it becomes more in service to yourself, myself. It becomes more in service to myself and my own ego than in service to others.
And absolutely. And I think when we live our life in service to ourselves, our world gets really, really small.
Yeah.
start living, I think it's easy to get offended quicker
Mm.
and easier, and it's harder to let it go.
Mm.
But if we can live with an others focused mindset, there's a lot of freedom in that. And there isn't a roller coaster to ride upon or chasing of the wind.
Mm. Oh boy. So, I mean, rejection is still hard, and we still don't. I mean, I don't want to be the source of somebody's rejection. I don't want people to feel rejected around me. How can our listeners, do a better job or be more mindful
Mhm.
about the way that we might unintentionally, give off these signs of rejection?
Yeah. So I think it's being aware of what's going on below the surface within ourselves and other people, knowing that as much junk as I'm carrying around in my life, someone else is carrying that much junk. And to choose gentleness, to choose that thinking about others before myself. And as far as the unintentional rejection, a genuine apology goes a long way.
Hmm.
Like I did with my daughter, I just explained, I'm sorry. I was thinking about this thing that's weighing on me. And my tone of voice, and I indicated
Hmm.
whether I talked to you really shortly, or I just yelled across the room, or I, just glared at you. I'm so sorry. I'm really thinking about this other thing, and I wasn't in the moment with you.
Hmm.
And so I think being very aware that there is so much under the surface going on. It's kind of like your iceberg illustration that we talk about in the manager cohort and the academy. Is just there's so much under the surface. Just remembering there's so much under the surface. And I also think dignity is important, to know that I carry
Hmm.
dignity, you carry dignity. And how can I make sure that we both retain this dignity?
Hmm. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So your subtitle is How Looking Through a Different Lens Changes Everything. Can you speak to the photography references and how you relate those to rejection?
All right. So, yes, I am a photographer. I I'm a serious hobby photographer. I don't have a business, but I do. I've taken my kids as portraits. I just love it. And the thing that I learned is that how we frame a photograph, we can know, because we were there in the moment, we see the trash on the ground, but the picture that we actually capture doesn't have that. So it's like
Hmm.
you're at the ocean and you're capturing, the waves, but there's like 20 other people capturing the same shot. Well, I could get all of their stuff in the picture with me, or I could frame it in such a way that I only see the beauty that I want to capture and not all the other. The other thing that I've also loved about lenses is that there are different lenses for different purposes. We have a wide angle lens that gets this wide view. And sometimes we need to step back from rejection and take that wide angle view. And then there's other lenses that are macro lenses where we can
Hmm.
get in really close, because we need to examine some of the roots of why we respond the way that we do, and why we're internalizing so much of this instead of dealing with it and letting it go and
Hmm.
releasing it from our lives.
Hmm. That's awesome. Um, you know, you talk about freedom, and you mentioned that God He used your greatest fear to let you experience the greatest freedom. What does freedom look like for you now?
Freedom for me looks like knowing that I can be here sitting with you, knowing that there might be a listener out there that is going to be like, that's going to reject me.
Mm.
And knowing that I'm not going to censor or filter my message out of fear of that particular stranger that I don't know, that may or may not be thinking this lady's a loony. So freedom for me is handling it that way. It's stepping into meetings and situations where I may have some conflict with another person, and knowing that I can still um, take up space in the room, and I don't have to make myself small. I don't have to make my opinion small, but I can choose whether I bring it to the table or not.
Hmm.
And and so that's what freedom looks like in two of those situations.
Hmm. Awesome. Okay, Jessica. So, aside from finding you through Voice of Influence, people can find your book. Where can people find your book? When does it release? What can they do to help out, get the message out, or and also just yeah, like tell us a little bit about that before I ask you one more question.
Okay, so my book releases on Kindle January 10th, and then it'll be available soft cover January 24th. You'll be able to purchase it on Amazon. I have a website, welcomegrace.com, and that there's more information about me and my speaking and my book on that website. And I also write at crosswalk.com, and I believe.com as well. And then I had a piece picked up by the War Cry, and a piece will be in Focus on the Family in 2023 or 2024. So
Okay, Jessica. So, what last piece of advice do you want to give to people who would like to have a voice of influence?
I would say for those people that are wanting to have a voice of influence is that rejection will stand in your way. Fear of rejection will stand in your way. And it will actually prevent you from having the kind of influence that you really want to have. So if you can get to the bottom of rejection relationships and why rejection bothers you so much, your voice of influence is going to grow. The second thing that I would say is that the time that I spent in the Voice of Influence program that Andrea has created helped with the shift of thinking for me. It helped me put some pieces together. It confirmed my strengths and affirmed my voice and what I actually had to bring to whatever situation I find myself in.
Well, I'm sure that people are very clear on why I'm so excited that you are doing so much to help our clients. And thank you so much, Jessica, for being part of our team. I am truly, truly grateful and excited for the work that you're doing, the book that you've written, and the difference that you're making in the world. So thanks for being a voice of influence, Jessica.
And thank you for having me today. So I appreciate being a part of the team.